Good afternoon. My name is Bob Plaschke. I'm the CEO of PepperBall, or pepperball.com. We're the leading provider of non-lethal tactical solutions or capabilities that police agencies around the US and around the world use to de-escalate situations. For us, our mission is about saving lives, and part of that is to put tools in the hands of police officers who can engage folks at distance and help them kind of change their behavior or gain compliance, get them to do what they need them to do without having to get too close to them, having to kind of be forced to move to less lethal or, unfortunately, in the worst cases, lethal solutions. And when we talk about saving lives, we also talk about the saving the lives of the police officers that are out there every day protecting us. They themselves to use a lethal weapon or even to see what they see on the streets. It's a horrific mental challenge. As I read in a Boston University study, police officers are 50% more likely to commit suicide than an average citizen, and more officers die from suicide than they die in the line of duty. And that untold story is the topic for our guest today, Michael Sugrue, if I've pronounced that correctly. Michael, welcome. Michael is as he'll tell you, a former decorated officer in the Air Force and a police officer, and the author of Relentless Courage, which is a study of his own experiences. He's a speaker that goes around the country talking about mental health and talking to police officers, and is our guest today. Michael, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Please just tell us your background, your story, kind of in what you're doing today.
It's a long story, so I'm going to try to make it as short as possible. I actually come from a law enforcement family. My stepfather, I consider my hero. He's the one that raised me along with my mother, but he worked for the Sausalito Police Department and then the Richmond Police Department. And I actually knew at the age of 8 years old that this was my calling. This is what I wanted to do. I went off to college, got a degree in criminal justice, full scholarship through the Air Force. When I graduated in '98, I went straight into security forces, which is basically anti-terrorism, force protection, law enforcement, nuclear security, air-based ground defense. I did that for 6.5 years, served all over the world, from the Middle East to Europe, South America, all over the US. Got out as a captain. I was actually stationed back here at Travis Air Force Base in California. And I went straight into civilian law enforcement. I was hired by the Walnut Creek Police Department. Went through the academy, started in December of 2004 as a fully sworn officer. Worked a bunch of different assignments, from patrol officer, field training officer, detective. I was undercover 2 years on a California State Drug Task Force, promoted to sergeant, and was also a public information officer. And my story today really starts as a brand new sergeant. Actually, the day after Christmas, I was involved in a very traumatic incident. Ended up being a fatal officer-involved shooting. And that was my tipping point. Like most first responders, I never talked about the horrific things that we see and deal with on a daily basis. I just bottled them up. I kept it from my family, thought I was protecting them. And really, I isolated, thinking that none of this stuff was ever going to bother me. And that shooting was my tipping point. I had literally been exposed to hundreds of traumatic incidents before that, just like most first responders, our firefighters, our paramedics, our police officers, dispatchers. I got to the point where I literally was losing everything. I lost my marriage. My health started to fail. I endured a 4-year federal lawsuit for a justified shooting. Ended up being put on trial in San Francisco. And it got to the point, it was so bad that I didn't want to be here anymore. I literally started putting myself in dangerous situations at work, hoping to get killed in the line of duty. And it was another very tragic incident I talk about in my book that literally saved my life. And that was my wake-up call. And in December of 2016, I finally asked for help. And that's where I started my journey of recovery from post-traumatic stress injury, what I like to call it, versus disorder. Now I'm on the other side of that. I medically retired in 2018. I'm living a phenomenal life. I'm living proof that things do get better. And so now I'm on a mission, not just across the United States, but all over the world to smash the stigma when it comes to talking about mental health, especially among our military members and our first responders.
Wow, what a great story. I'm struck by that word disorder versus injury. I mean, it's nothing genetic. It's nothing that you asked for. It's imposed on you based off what you do every day. And I think I don't know if it's a shame, but I think the word disorder is not appropriate in that context. I think injury, a much better way to articulate it.
I couldn't agree more. And that word disorder has a very negative connotation. And that's part of what creates the stigma. It makes people feel helpless, like they have no control over this. It's something that they're stuck with. And ironically enough, most of our first responders, paramedics, firefighters, police officers, we often sustain physical injuries like knee injuries, back injuries, shoulder injuries. Well, it's a proven fact that repeated exposure to trauma causes a physical and a chemical change to the human brain. So this is a physical injury. It's a physical injury to the mind. And so we need to create the same culture of supporting our first responders when they need help, because there is a roadmap to recovery and there's things that we can do to get better. No different than if you've got a bad shoulder or bad back, there's steps that you can take, whether it's physical therapy, pain medication, injections, maybe surgery, maybe more physical therapy. The point is that there is a road to recovery, and that's where we need to change this culture and this stigma.
One thing that struck me about your background is that you faced traumatic situations in the military and an equal, if not greater number, in day-to-day policing. Is there? I mean, I hate to ask, but is there a difference in that context because you're doing it overseas, or because you're engaging with your own kind of fellow citizens?
I'll tell you, actually, most of my trauma comes from civilian law enforcement and not the military. Now, understand that everybody's experience is different, but I want to point out something that most people don't think about. So, first off, most military members are not combat veterans. A very small number of military veterans actually go into combat. Now, when these service members are in combat, they're in a defined hostile zone for a set period of time. That could be 6 months, it could be a year. Maybe do it once, maybe twice, maybe three times in their military career. But if you think about our police officers, especially, and now most officers are going to work 20 to 30 years. And in that time, we're literally in combat every single day. There is no downtime, there is no safe zone. We're literally every contact we make, whether it's a 911 call, whether we stop and talk to somebody at the street, we're making a vehicle stop, every single contact is a potential lethal threat. And really, I think there's a big difference in that, because when I was in the military, when I was in the Middle East, I was on heightened alert, I was on edge, I was anticipating things, expecting things. But when I was stateside and I was back at my normal base, I was off duty, I wasn't thinking like that. I wasn't on high alert. I wasn't constantly watching over my shoulder. And so, again, everyone's experience is different. But what I think is ironic is that, the public generally accepts post traumatic stress in our military members. It's almost expected. And I think the military has done a very good job at educating our service member, at providing resources, at creating a culture where it is okay to ask for help. Now, when you talk about our first responders, we're just starting to do this, whereas the military has been doing this for over a decade. And I think that's the real difference, is that the first responder culture doesn't have that same acceptance of asking for help, and they don't have the same level of resources that many of our military members have.
No, it makes unfortunately, when I frequently go out with police officers and police chiefs, and as I found out, when you go to dinner or go meet with them, they would prefer to sit with their back to the wall. And over time, I've become just kind of thoughtful about making sure they have that seat. And you think about that, to be here at home, kind of, and always want to make sure you're back, that you have a clear visibility, because to your point, you're always on edge. And how do, I mean, what is it must be so difficult to turn it off, so to speak, to feel comfortable when you're off duty. Is that even possible?
It's very difficult. I mean, I actually retired in 2018, but honestly, every time I go out to eat, I always sit facing the front door with my back to the wall. I'm always aware of who's around me. I'm constantly scanning. I mean, I work out every single day. It's part of my daily routine. And when I'm at the gym, I'm constantly scanning people's hands. I'm checking their waistbands. It's these things that are so ingrained for me because it's survival. And I would say that after time, it does lessen. I don't think it fully goes away. But to be, usually when you're at home, that's really the only safe zone, and that's the only area where you truly feel like you can relax and not have to worry about any threats. But I also think that, since the political climate has changed the last couple of years, that officers have become targets off duty, not just on duty. And so I think now that heightened sense of alert, it's higher than it ever has been.
So, Michael, a number of police officers, the executive staff will hopefully watch this. What would be two or three kind of either lessons learned or kind of themes that you'd like to convey to them?
I'll tell you the single most important thing, and I was just talking about this today on an interview, but we need our police leaders and our police executives to be honest, open, and to be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is with their officers, with the people that they command and they supervise, we need to show them the real humans that we are. We've all endured trauma in the workplace. We've dealt with issues outside of work, whether that's marital problems, family problems, health problems, financial problems. But we need to get rid of this kind of perfect image that leaders often like to portray. And the same goes for the military. I mean, it's been a long-standing thing that, the higher you move up in rank, the more pressure there is to kind of portray this perfect image and this perfect life and this perfect family. But in reality, nobody's perfect, and we all suffer, we all go through things. But how is it that a subordinate is ever going to open up to a superior and share, that they're going through difficult times and they need help if that leader is not willing to be vulnerable themselves first? And this simple change in leadership and culture, I think, can save countless lives. And this applies at all levels. I mean, we have leaders, whether you're a year on, you're a leader. You know what? Because there's people just graduating the police academy. We have formal leaders like field training officers, corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, all the way up to police chief. And we need these people to be the example to say, look, I was once in your shoes. Here's what was going on, but here is how I overcame it. Here's how I came out the other side of this successfully. I'm living proof that yes, this stuff does happen, but things can get better. And I think that is the single most important thing that we need to do. And that's going to change this culture of putting shame behind, admitting that you need help, admitting that you have a problem, and that's going to save lives.
Admitting that you're human, and how could you not be affected by what you've, to your point, 20 years of that kind of tension, that kind of pressure, that kind of daily just daily impact. Um, and what would you say to the executives, folks like myself, who watch this, who hopefully have the same degree of respect and admiration, but sit on the other side of that blue line? We don't really know. We can't empathize with what you guys go through. What would you say to us in terms of things that we could do?
Well, the first thing is to read Relentless Courage, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a no holds barred look at the real humans behind the badge and behind the uniform. And I'm going to take some ownership here, though. But as law enforcement, we don't do a good job of letting the outside people in. We also put up this image of strength and invincibility. We've got the uniform on, the badge, the gear, the bulletproof vest. All of that stuff is intimidating. It creates a distance between us and the communities that we serve. And I've heard from countless readers time and time again that this book helped change their entire perception of law enforcement. And I'm talking both sides, people that had a positive view already and other people that had very negative experiences with law enforcement all across the country. And this book, and again, I'm not special or unique, I'm just willing to bear it all, the good, the bad, the ugly, the mistakes that I made. But the fact is, we are human. We do care. We go out there every single day willing to put our lives on the line for complete strangers, knowing that we may not come home to our own families. Now, that's not what we signed up for, but that's what we're willing to do. And we're willing to go out there every single day and do it because we care. We truly care about the people that we serve and the communities that we protect.
No, I was talking to, I think I was talking to a fire chief, and he said, where else, what other line of duty would someone knocking on the door, you'd let them in, you let them engage you or engage your family. I mean, the level of trust that they have is that you place in the police officer today, and in return, what the risks they have to take to have that trust. I don't know, it's an awesome sense of responsibility and an awesome set of challenges that come along with it. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. Folks, Relentless Courage is on Amazon. Easy enough to order, just a couple of clicks, but a great read if you're trying to understand policing and for those police officers watching, to help them think through how they can do their jobs better and be more vulnerable and more empathetic in their work. Michael, thanks again for taking the time. Appreciate your service, and good luck to the work you're trying to do for policing.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.